Hello, welcome to part 1 of 6, looking at the 6 tier 10 coal destroyers in the game. We're going to start with the kind of more obvious picks, you could say, and then slowly work our way through into the more, maybe niche and unique coal destroyers. We're going to start with the Marceau, everyone's most recommended coal destroyer. And if you've watched any of my other ship reviews, I pretty much say the conclusion at the start of the video in case you don't have time for this nonsense. And Marceau is still the best coal destroyer in the game. Kind of inarguably, I don't think it's particularly close. And it's still one of the best tier 10 destroyers in general in the entire game. And it comes down to the combination of DPM, destroyer fighting, farming, and survivability. And this is a pretty bad situation, right? We've got a Smoland, a Gearing, a Castilla that are all looking at me. And this is fine. This would be really bad at most destroyers. Really, really bad. In the Marceau, this is not a problem. This is legitimately not a problem. The speed juke ability on the Marceau, combined with the damage saturation, combined with its just in general straight line speed, you just don't eat shit in this boat. You don't eat shit in this boat unless you are up against a god tier aimer, or you are not speed juking, not juking properly. So you can see here, the arcs. If anyone's played Marceau, they know about the arcs. The arcs are extremely bad. Some of the worst in the game for destroyers. But this kind of is going to lead me into a discussion on destroyer balancing, okay? Balancing of gunboats. And here's my question to you. If a ship requires high skill to damage enemies, but its potential damage is double of a ship that requires low skill to damage enemies, is the ship that requires higher skill all of a sudden balanced? My response to that is absolutely fucking not. The ship is not balanced at all. The Marceau is objectively overpowered. It is way too good at way too many things. I said this in the Gdansk video. Now, do I think the Marceau is as brain damaged as the Gdansk? No, because the Marceau takes room temp IQ to play, and the Gdansk takes maybe room temp IQ plus, 4 or 5 IQ points to play. This is a very easy ship to play, and it's very easy for massive game pact, and that is something that is, I think, very unique among destroyers in general, but coal destroyers. I mean, there's not many destroyers in this game that are super easy to play and impact the game hugely. Smollin, like the super OP premiums. Even a ship like Ragnar actually takes some skill to play. You have to have impeccable aim. You have to be able to juke very easily in a boat that's big and kind of slow, right? There's plenty of... That's actually amazing that guy sat in that smoke. Here, I didn't want to shoot, and the reason I didn't want to shoot is I wasn't sure if I would be spotted by somebody else. And I don't know what the Wisconsin was doing, so I didn't want to shoot. I probably should have, because I probably could have killed that guy, but you see that the Wisconsin didn't actually push, so now I'm kind of free to like YOLO rush this guy. And the Marceau, I said this in the Gdansk video. The Gdansk being a little more brain damage because of the radar and the shell arcs, of course. But in my opinion, if you are going to, you being Wargaming, if Wargaming is going to create a destroyer that is god tier at winning 1v1s against DDs, which would be what I would identify as high impact gameplay, consistently high impact gameplay. If we're going to have a destroyer like Marceau, like Gdansk, that is super good at fighting DDs 1v1, we can't let it farm well. That, and, for most ships you do kind of see this trend, but then the super overpowered stuff, kind of breaks this trend. And this is part of why, I think Ragnar, Smollin, ships like that, Marceau, Gdansk are objectively overpowered, inarguably overpowered, not just situationally overpowered, is because they're too good at both things. The Marceau is too good at winning a 1v1 against destroyers, even a 1v2. You know, just straight up, it bullies destroyers. Almost every DD in the game gets bullied by this thing. There's very few exceptions. Assuming you're a high skill player at least, or even a decent skilled player. Now, if you're a complete potato in the Marceau, then the shell arcs are going to definitely fuck you up. But I mean, you see how like easily you could argue those guys I fought at sea weren't the best aimers, but you see how easily the Marceau can win these early game DD fights, and then it's also one of the best farmers in the game. And the same thing goes for Gdansk. Like I said in my rant review of Gdansk, it's way too good at too many things, which is what makes it overpowered. The Kleber, for example, is not necessarily balanced because I think the inherent design of gunboats in World of Warships these days, like just the that guy hit a torp. It's pretty funny. Just the kind of inherent design of gunboats in World of Warships these days makes them unfair because there's so much hydropower creep. The game is played at longer ranges. Um, and torpedo boats have kind of become very feast or famine. They're no longer the consistent spot for your team and consistently hit torps. They're more like some games you're not allowed to play at all, and then other games you get 200k by just clicking on gray lines, right? So, but this speed completely nullifies Marceau's concealment disadvantage. I mean, this guy, like, realized I was, he outspots me by well over a kilometer, and he has literally no chance. He tried to turn out and even got beached, and I mean, it's just the damage output, and this is what I was getting back to my point with the Kleber. The Kleber is slightly more balanced in my opinion because, well, yes, it does have much easier shells to hit. You have to keep in mind that Marceau basically has Kleber reload booster DPM. Very comparable, almost identical. The Marceau just normally shooting has basically the same damage output as Kleber with the reload booster on. So Kleber only has good DPM in situational moments. You have limited use of the reload booster. You actually have to use it intelligently. You don't have grease lightning turret traverse like you do on Marceau. Part of what makes Marceau so good at fighting even other gunboats is the turret traverse. In something like a Kleb, you get easily caught sometimes if you're a little bit surprised by the turret traverse. The torps, while worse than Kleber for a pure YOLO rush, are overall like objectively better, more useful, easier to use, despite doing less damage and being slower. So you're much better at 1v1ing destroyers than something like a Kleber. You're actually much better at farming battleships than Kleber, assuming you can aim. You are much better at torpedoing from stealth than Kleber. So basically the only thing that is quote-unquote balancing the Marceau, there is one thing that is quote-unquote balancing it, and that is the shell arcs. And I reject this notion. I fundamentally reject the concept that because shells take more skill to land, the ship is balanced. Like, a perfect example would be Vermont compared to... Let's compare Vermont to GK, okay? I promise this will make sense. What shells are easier to aim? Well, it's inarguably GK shells. They're way easier to aim. I mean, you have to lead people less, right? The shells are way faster. Or even Preußen, which also has 30mm overmatch. The shells are way easier to aim than Vermont. Does that make Vermont balanced because it's harder to aim with? Like, no, Vermont is disgusting. It's a fucking disgusting game design, right? Obviously. So, like, what are we fucking doing? And Marceau's been in the game forever. It's never going to get nerfed. This is another really good reason why, it probably should be your first coal boat. The Marceau will absolutely make you a better player. I think that's implicit value it provides as well. If you're used to playing the Kleber and then you go to play the Marceau, it will initially feel kind of rough because your damage farm at range playstyle is objectively harder, but the potential damage output is much greater. The better concealment keeps you alive longer. It actually lets you fight DDs. This concealment disadvantage of like 1 to 1.3 kilometers on stealth destroyers is almost 100% nullified by how fast you are, whereas in a ship like Kleber, it's really not nullified at all. yeah, you have way too much going for you in a ship like the Marceau. There are other coal destroyers, as we're going to look at, that are say easier or harder to play. But the easier to play destroyers, while brain damaged and disgusting in their own right, cough cough Sherman, right? They don't really have anywhere near the solo game impact. Marceau can carry harder than almost any destroyer in the game. If you saw my daring video, I believe I said that daring carries harder than any tech tree destroyer in the game. I think that's probably true. I do kind of stand by that. Maybe you could say Gdansk can carry a bit harder, but it doesn't have the sustain of daring, obviously. But Marceau carries insanely hard. And it doesn't just carry in random battles, it carries in ranked. It has a place in competitive, which is very unique to the coal destroyers that we're going to look at. Basically, none of them have a place in any kind of clan battle game mode. Some of them have an okay to dubious use in ranked. We'll look at that. And then some are kind of random monsters, stat patterns, or fun, perhaps, dynamic ships, sure. But the Marceau is kind of like a top three, top four destroyer in every single game mode. You can play at full range. You see, I have 13.8 range. We'll go over the captain spec at the end, obviously, but you can play, more hybrid build like this where you have some range. You can play a fight destroyer only, cap contest only type of build. You can have a swift and silent sail around the map kind of build, and like there's no you could throw a dart at Marceau's captain skills board and still have a great ship. Like you could build this ship just objectively wrong and still stomp on people, which is pretty ridiculous. Um, it's playing the game on easy mode. It really is. But unlike other ships that play the game on easy mode, you have the game impact, right? Like Slava's playing the game on easy mode, for sure. Undeniably, the shells take like no skill to aim with. But you don't have the carry potential that other ships do, even with same caliber guns, right? And Marceau, as a no disengage, meaning no smokescreen, no spotting or utility, meaning no radar or hydro, it is a pure open water gunboat, but it can still carry. There's not a lot of pure open water gunboats like that have no spotting ability, no utility of any kind, and can still carry. You can carry in a ship like the Kleber through your sheer damage farming potential. Like this game wasn't super high damage, right? We're still 2K base XP, and you know, in a 1v3, I mean, this is the kind of game, like these are Marceau games, and you have to keep in mind, right? Like I just mentioned, this is more of a hybrid build with the farming potential. That, in my opinion, is what I refer to as a hybrid build with Marceau. Is you're not 100% DPM, you're not 100% DD hunting, and you're not 100% farming, right? Because 100% farming, you would drop something like concealment, which I think is delusional, but uh, it's just you look at how little damage was received for how focused I got earlier in this game, right? The damage saturation just keeps you alive, but basically, doing half full and half health, half, a quarter to just, this is not a farming game. Obviously, this is a high game impact game, but yeah, it's just so easy because you relocate around the map so quickly. There's just not really a lot of ships that counter you in this boat. The only thing that counters a Marceau heavy is another speed juking open water gunboat player who's really good at speed juking and has railguns. Something like a Kleber. If you fight a really really good Kleber player, a really really good Kaba player, as rare as those are, then you do all of a sudden have a bit of a tough time simply because your difficulty of being hit is nowhere close to how difficult they are to hit, right? But against players of similar skill and things like Smolin, I mean, you're gonna shit on a Smolin assuming you know what you're doing. You're gonna shit on like every hybrid and torp boat in the game that you catch. Um, yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the next replay. Okay. If you want to look in the top right of the screen, you will see that we are 20 seconds into this game, we're already going 50 knots, and we can talk about a incredibly valuable component of Marceau that is kind of overlooked by a lot of people. Kleber can do it as well because they have similar speed, but the timing breaking that Marceau gives. If you look at the enemy team, they have Delarna, Sherman, Yugamo, Fletcher. We're talking maybe 41, 42 knots on the Yugamo with the Swift and Silent speed boost, right? Yeah, nothing close to the even while partially maneuvering 52 to 55 knots of the Marceau. And so much like the Incomparable breaks the timing for cruiser players who push in early, the Marceau breaks the timing for destroyer players. You can see my Yamagiri, and keep in mind Yamagiri is faster than any of their ships. But look at how far behind me he is. So he's spotting the outside, and instead of curling out, which a lot of Marceau players do, they rush out into an unknown situation early. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to park kind of right here, and that is going to give me spotting on this line. And if you see what my Yamagiri is doing, this is what a lot of DD players do, is they come down the 10 line and they turn in or they turn out. And because of where I am, anyone coming in like this and trying to turn out, I'm actually going to nullify a large amount of my spotting disadvantage. And you see here we just catch the Delarna. And because I'm positioned like this, you can see that none of his teammates can support him. He cannot torpedo me because his torps are going to have to come in on an angle like this. And I'm easily going to be able to dodge them. So this early aggressive positioning in Marceau just got me a third of this guy's HP in a cap, right? And I think something that I see players do in the Marceau a lot that is a mistake is they would do what I did here, but they would just either do one of two things. They would bum rush the rock on C and just sit on the rock and try to get the cap, or they like to curl out. A lot of Marceau players love to sprint through a cap and then curl out. And if you know where the enemy ships are and what ships there are, that's totally fine and valid, but to do that super early in the game is not. Now, here you see my Yamato's basically AFK, Kandi's AFK, Zhao is kiting, he's got a bungo on his ass, that doesn't go well for him. You know, Yamagiri's out here spotting, doing his job, so there's no value in me going outside to try to farm what a Stern and Clausewitz, no value to that, but there are two BBs and a Fletcher on B, so I'm just going to start immediately heading this way. And here is one of the few ships that can be a problem in Marceau. There's not a lot of ships that give you a problem. The only reason the Sherman is a problem is the shell arcs are obviously significantly better than yours. So assuming he knows how to aim, this could be a very, very problematic fight. Now, there's really not much to say here. This guy can't shoot his way out of a wet paper bag, so pretty fucking fortunate for me. So I'm just trying to get now behind the next island. So I want to point my stern at the Sherman so he can't use sap, and then I can get some shots in on this Bourgogne. And this Bourgogne being a full secondary build is going to bring me to why I think you overall should probably take range on your Marceau captain. And really it's just there's too many Schlieffens, Hanovers, full secondary build freaks, Napolis with Pack-a-Punch. There's too many people who rely on AI gunners to damage you. AI, of course, being the most talented aimers in the video game. They do not miss. They do not miss. They're much more talented than the average battleship player. So you do actually have to, watch out. So I'm trying to isolate because the Marceau is very, very good. Obviously, it's speed juking. Very, very good. I'm using the AP here a little bit. Bourgogne is 32 upper belt, obviously, and nose, and 32 everywhere. This is one of the very few things the Marceau is worse at than the Kleber. The Kleber has extremely, extremely potent AP. The kind of AP that can Citadel ultralight cruisers, 8 kilometers-ish, maybe even a little bit farther. The Marceau's AP obviously has very good damage, 2450. But incredibly dog shit AP pen. Like, to put it in perspective, the Holland has better AP penetration than the Marceau. But really, the reason why you're using the AP on the Marceau, it has nothing to do with the ability to Citadel cruisers. It's just like upper belt ships. but really only weak upper belts. At this range, uh, yeah, not a lot of AP pen here. Like, you're not penning Germans, Russians, that kind of thing in Marceau with AP, really at almost any range. But, closer ranges, Americans, French, British, the 32 to 38 millimeter side plating battleships, definitely I am looking to use once I have a fire. So that would mean once I have one fire, if they're not a monkey and took fire prevention, and then obviously you're trying for two fires if they don't have fire prevention, then I would switch to the AP because it's just a nice damage buff, right? It does about 30% more damage than the HE, which is pretty cool. Maybe a bit less than that. What is HE here? 18? Yeah, 25% more. Inarguably nice. So I don't want to fight the Wooster. I really don't want to. In the Kleber now, because of the improved shell arcs, I would maybe fight the Wooster here a little bit because I would hit him a lot more than he would hit me. But this is kind of an even fight, Wooster v Marceau. So I'm going to go back to C. I'm going to try to keep the Wooster between, a rock between me and the Wooster. I'm going to try to kind of get in here. We've got all of their DDs, right? Fletcher, Yugamo are in the cap. Delarna, Sherman are in the other cap. So we're just trying to isolate as much as we can. The Fletcher opened up on me with AP. My man is just absolutely fucking gaming. Absolutely fucking gaming. And I'm going to do something here that I think you should start doing in your fast gunboats is I didn't keep going. I didn't keep going because what a lot of people do is they're like, ooh, that guy's about to go behind the rock and I can get some cheeky shots in and he won't react in time and shoot me. And if you just do this, like you're about to get behind a rock and you immediately slam on the brakes, especially with speed boost on, you catch a lot of people off guard and get multiple salvos in them. They just probably weren't expecting you to get into them. So that's definitely a habit that I try to do in Marceau. Now, obviously, if I'm getting focused by 5, 6 people, I'm going to jump behind the rock, right? But when it's kind of a DD and a stealth destroyer, I know, like right here, this is a perfect example. This guy thought I was going behind the rock. So he was thinking, I'm going to get 2 shots in, and this Marceau will maybe not even get one, maybe one, but not much. And then by slamming on the brakes, I'm missing because I'm aiming like a fucking dog. But you see this strategy that I'm employing here, which is I'm kind of ruining. I'm being unpredictable. Like I'm ruining the timing of what he thinks is going to happen. That guy opened up because, and he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to get chip damage in on a healthy gunboat when he can, right? Because obviously that's super valuable. But by speed juking and slamming on the brakes as I'm about to get dark, all of a sudden I put him in this weird situation where I get to shoot a bunch of salvos at him, and he had to smoke. He would not have probably used that smoke if I had gray lined full speed behind the island, right? So that's kind of the idea with that. I'm widespreading the torps solely because I just want the Sherman to leave the smoke. I don't think I would ever hit him. Now I'm trying to gray line behind the rock. So I'm kind of in a weird position here because if I come out to the left, the Fletcher will probably spot me and the Sherman smoked up. That's not good. I don't want to just let the Sherman free farm me. I don't know what the Clausewitz is doing either. So I need to have an escape route. And the Clausewitz is coming in. So what I'm probably going to have to do, if you look on the minimap, is get here, right here. I'm probably going to have to dive behind this island. So I'm really hoping that the torps that I shot at the Sherman, and there you go. There you go. That's why I shot those. That's why they weren't stacked, because I wanted to guarantee he would leave the smoke. And the timing was admittedly very blessed because he had to leave the smoke kind of right when I got hydroed. Otherwise, with his low HP, obviously I would blind fire him and probably kill him very quick, but you can't, rely on that all the time. So that's kind of the general idea with why I was widespreading the torps. Now, I would say against a ship that doesn't have hydro that I could maybe expect to hit, I wouldn't widespread in that situation. But my only goal, like I said, is get him out of the smoke. This guy's making plays, man. People are making plays in this game. I mean, what can you say? And then he didn't have the patience to wait. He torped way too early. If he had torped right now, probably 100% would have hit a torp on me, maybe even killed me. So This is another thing that I see a lot of destroyers do in general. This isn't applying just to this guy or just against gunboats, but you gotta wait. You gotta hold on to those torps, man. Patience is a virtue in a lot of times. So I would probably be dead if he had just, because there's no way I kill him in one salvo, right? He was on like 4,000 HP. So the game is now basically 100% over, much like last game. I have essentially killed all of their destroyers, not quite solo, but you know, the majority of the damage on all DDs has basically been the Marceau. It's such a cancerous ship to fight against. It really is. Uh, it's arguably really up there. Even something like the Gdansk, while I do think the Gdansk is objectively overpowered and maybe even stupider, the at least from the perspective of the ship getting farmed or 1v1ing the Gdansk, I mean, it's inarguably like 10 times easier to hit a Gdansk than a Marceau, right? So, while it does have comparable DPM to Marceau, maybe even overall better because railguns effectively increase its DPM and fire starting, the cope that you can at least have as like a battleship, a cruiser getting farmed is, I can actually hit this fucking guy, right? Or in your destroyer, like even a daring, yeah, the Gdansk is gonna like dumpster you. It's gonna do like half your HP with a 12-second radar. But you can at least cope your way out of, like, if you're a good aimer in something like the daring, you can say do 8 to 10k damage back. Not that that's gonna save you, but you can at least, cope. Like I said, you can cope your way into some permanent damage. And yes, the Marceau takes permanent damage in the sense that it doesn't have a heal, but I mean, shoot a million potential damage at a Marceau, it's going to be well over half HP if it knows how to juke. Shoot a million potential damage at even a gunboat like the Gdansk, and unless the guys aiming at the Gdansk are turbo dog shit, that thing is going to be almost fucking dead, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. Is the Marceau is, you know, it is objectively harder to. It takes more skill to farm in than railgun ships, but it takes way less skill to dodge in than almost anything. And the ease of dodging and the simplicity of dodging, of just looking where the enemy aims, insta speed juking, insta accelerating, allows you to focus on your gun aiming way easier. Let's look at the detailed report for this one. I mean, a little bit of farming, but like most of this guy's HP, right? Half of this guy's HP, a third of this guy's HP, and I didn't really trade anything hard. Like the Bourgogne did the most damage to me of anyone that game, right? I didn't trade almost anything to do this damage to the Sherman. I traded what, 1 or 2,000 HP. Delarna, I traded 0. Fletcher, I traded maybe 3 to 4k to damage him. Most of my health was lost to the battleships. So it's just too good. I mean, obviously the takeaway from this is get the like, if for some reason you don't have the Marceau, I don't know why, other than you can't hit a thing. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just saying if you cannot hit a shell in floaty gun DDs, then okay. If you play Holland, Gearing, Yu Yang, these ships with floatier shells, and you feel like you literally can't hit anything, then okay, I would say maybe the Marceau is not on your list, and arguably most of the other cold DDs are better. But assuming you can aim even semi-competently with floatier DD shells, I mean, it's just one of the best destroyers in the game overall. It really is. I've mentioned this in some videos, but the fact that the captain doesn't have to change at all is a big plus. Like, Kleb, you're arguably still going to take range on, even though that gives you absurd 16 km range, because it is, like, effective. So, I mean, basically the build between Marceau and Kleb, unless you're running some freak shit like Ledgemod Kleb, kind of the build doesn't really change. And also the captain's extremely good on Marceau. I don't want to hear what they... Let's jump back in the port. We can talk about the captain. Okay, super quick before we get back to what I was about to say about the captain. We can look at the build. It's completely bog standard. There's literally not a single thing that you would change here. Absolutely nothing that you would change on this. And going to the captain. So there's a school of thought that says the the premium, what does wargaming call this? Unique captains? Yeah. The unique captain, Abonnieu, is worse than the enhanced captain. Okay? That is the idea. And the reason why people say that is because Honor has improved adrenaline rush and improved grease the gears. Now, we are talking about the Marceau. You could probably make a case this captain may be better on the Kleber because the Kleber Traverse is pure horseshit dog ass, and maybe you change these around. But Grease the Gears has absolutely zero value on Marceau. Zero value. So that's out of the window. So really is an extra 500, right? Because normally the Marceau is 25.4 HP. You now have 25.9. Is 500 base XP or a improvement of 25% on adrenaline rush? That's relative improvement, right? Is that better? I would say objectively no. There's a couple reasons I would say that. Number one, the improved adrenaline rush only becomes really even measurable on a ship like Marceau when you're almost dead. Because let's say you're 20% HP, so you've lost 80% of your health. You will have a 16% decrease in your reload, right? The max you can get is a 20% when you're dead. So on, say, 5,000 HP, you will have a 16% reduction in your reload. That is pretty good. That is about, on the Marceau, that's going to be about a half second off of your reload. With the improved adrenaline rush of the Honor captain, that is going to be a 0.6 second off your reload. So when you're close to dead, the enhanced captain, Honor, will give you about 0.1 seconds off your reload. Now, Marceau, like Kleber, has French saturation. So once the ship parts, this is true of any destroyer, obviously, any ship. Once ship parts receive a certain amount of damage, they start basically giving people reduced, half damage. This just happens much, much faster on the French boats, and that's why their effective HP pool is. This effective HP pool of 25.9, unless you're being shot by overpenning AP, effectively gives you more like 30 to 40,000 HP, depending on what's shooting at you. So this might not seem like a lot, 500 HP. I understand it might not seem like a lot. But in a Marceau, when you are on 500 HP, destroyers shooting at you get like 1 to 300 damage per salvo. Because the shell damage drops off a fucking cliff when this ship is completely saturated. So I would argue that living to fire 3 to 4 extra salvos every time you die is more valuable than 0.1 second off your reload late game. That's what I would argue. I would also argue that this is more valuable when you are playing any game mode that doesn't rely on pure damage output, like, say, clan battles in your Marceau. This is objectively a superior skill because staying alive matters way more than dealing damage, way more. I would argue this is better in ranked as well, even when surviving matters almost as much, if not more, than killing people. So I do think also you saw in this video that when you get a cap in the Marceau, you get an extra % fire chance, which is very non-significant. You do get extra fire chance. The flooding is kind of whatever. You're kind of never going to get most of these. Getting a devastating strike in the Marceau, boy, can that happen? I suppose, man. Some guy could be the biggest bot in planet Earth and like a destroyer could eat 3 torps and die, but it doesn't really happen. you every now and then get 2 million potential damage. Doesn't really happen much. But this extra survivability and the extra fire chance every time you get a cap, you absolutely will get caps in Marceau quite consistently because you're so good at dominating DDs in the caps that you're usually running them out and then getting the cap. So I would say this captain is like absolutely excellent on Marceau. A little bit different story, like I said, on Kleber, where you're very incentivized to drop PM for turret traverse. So that is the captain build. Now I mentioned at the start of the video, there's multiple ways to build Marceau that are all semi-valid at least, and there is a real validity in dropping range for Swift and Silence in the Marceau, particularly in more competitive game mode. I cringe using the word competitive for ranked, but there is like legitimate value in this. You do go 50 knots without your speed boost up because Marceau's base speed is so high, you get so much more value out of Swift and Silence. The DPM hit is like literally whatever. So you shouldn't even care that this is hitting your DPM. It's really just hitting your range. The only reason I've played Marceau this way, Swift and Silence, it's a fun way to play the boat. Even in randoms, it is inarguably fun to play Swift and Silence Marceau and like exclusively go for caps, ambushing DDs, etc. The problem is there's so much bullshit in this game. There's so much bullshit in this game. Like the difference in speed juking at 11 versus 13 kilometers in the Marceau is night and day. All of a sudden, people who whiff every shell at 13 to 13.5 start hitting every shell at the 10 to 11 range, you know? So, you know, this kind of just opens up the targets you can farm. And there are games where there's maybe low DD count or the DDs run away from you and your role as a destroyer contesting ship is pretty limited and all you're doing is farming, or you've killed the destroyers and all you're doing is farming. And this makes the farming like way easier. And things like Schlieffen, Hanover, Napoli. There's so many AI gunner boats in the game that with 11.5, which is what your base range is, I believe it's 11.5, is kind of just unusable. You can still farm plenty of other ships, but nose in railgun Russian cruisers, kind of forget about it. They'll hit you with every salvo. Anything with good secondaries, forget about it. They'll start murdering you. So I do think this is overall in randoms kind of the best build, but if you want to get silly, you know, a little more dynamic and interesting play style, I do think Swift and Silence Marceau is more interesting to play. It turns the boat from a disgusting damage farmer to this really interesting hit and run cap recap back cap kind of ship. So you know, seems like a troll, but it kind of isn't. You know, play around with it a little bit. Even in something like clan battles, I've in the past run Swift and Silence Dazzle Marceau. You drop Fearless Brawler and main battery, and it's kind of fucking hilarious. Although that is a double-edged sword because Dazzle on a ship that's so hard to hit almost buffs enemies. Dazzle has a lot of value on really fat slow ships, but putting Dazzle on a ship that's hard for most players in randoms to hit can be a bit of a troll because like all of a sudden that Venezia player who can't aim lands 3 or 4 shells on you, which kind of sucks. So yeah, that is the Marceau, objectively the strongest of these destroyers. Does it take maybe a little more skill to play than like Sherman? Yeah, sure. You actually have to have hands to aim in. You know, can you play as passive as some of these others that farm at better, longer range, have longer range torps? Yeah, but as far as carry potential, I mean, I think it's inarguably that Marceau carries more games harder than any of these, and actually has a place in all game modes, unlike most of these. So, to me, I think it's still the first coal destroyer you should get, unless you really, really, really can't hit a fucking thing with destroyers with floaty shells. Anyway, we will see you in part 2 for the Sherman. Thank you for watching.